It's 11:02 on this Saturday morning in the city. Glad to have you with me. Move in a little bit closer to your radio so you can be nice and comfy as we move into this conversation. Kevin Powell joins us this morning, and Kevin has a new book called Grocery Shopping with My Mother. It is a collection of poems, and it is a remarkable book of poetry. The critics are saying that it is a great book, but it really is. It is. We'll share some of the poems with you this morning. But one of the things that is so intriguing about it is that it is creatively and spiritually inspired by Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. And I want Kevin will kind of talk with us about how that conceptually, how that works. But it is a collection of poems that kind of helps us walk through the rhythms of life, actually, and the rhythms of life, the rhythms of life in our time. An excellent book of poems by Kevin Powell. Songs, and again, spiritually inspired by Songs in the Key of Life. This is a book of poems that are most definitely in the key of life. Grocery Shopping with My Mother, a remarkable book of poems by Kevin Powell. And we're going to talk with Kevin about the book and about a number of other things that are happening in this generation. And as we have said earlier, Kevin Powell really is one of the most insightful voices in this generation. And it is our pleasure to have Kevin with us on this Saturday morning. Kevin, are you with me?
Yes, good morning to you. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Good to have you with us. There's a lot that we try to cover whenever we have an opportunity to talk to Kevin Powell. So we're going to move quickly. But first, let's start here. When the book Grocery Shopping with My Mother, first we need to talk about the title and how that title is so appropriate and correct for this collection of poems. But can we start with it being spiritually inspired by Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life? The book is kind of done like a record album, side one, side two, extra tracks. Let's talk a little bit about what you mean by it being inspired by Stevie's Songs in the Key of Life.
Well, that album came out when I was a child, and I didn't understand the depths of it at the time. But it's interesting that you just played I Wish, because that was one of the songs that we had to sing in grade school. We would sing that song and Sir Duke. And, over time, I came to listen to the entire album, and it stuck with me. I think it's the greatest album ever made, along with Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. I think it's a masterpiece of art and poetry and music, and the fact that it's so diverse. There's so many different themes that he touches upon. And so when I was looking for inspiration to write this book, this poetry book, which is it's my 15th book, but it's my first poetry book in 14 years. Not only did I, turn to Sonia Sanchez and Mary Baraka and Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou, and folks like that from our great traditions, but I'm a music head like you are, sir. So I turned to Smokey Robinson, and I turned to Nina Simone and Bob Marley, and I landed on this on Stevie Wonder, and I played that album more than any other as I was writing and thinking about stuff, because I wanted to express a range of things. Because one, the book is about my mom, because she got sick the last few years. And then two, I don't have to tell you, what's been going on in this country, all the insanity around George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter, the Trump era, the insurrection. And so I wanted to put myself in a space of being inspired in that kind of way. And that's where I landed on Stevie. And he's been consistent. I mean, just like you've been consistent, Mr. Law, as a member of the radio community for all these years, Stevie's been consistent with his voice as well. And I'm trying to do the same thing, because I realize this is a marathon. This work that we do to try to empower people is not a sprint. And so sometimes you need to turn back for some inspiration so you can continue to do your work.
Now, the title, Grocery Shopping with My Mother,
Yes, sir.
comes as that was the experience that you were engaged in. I mean, that title is so appropriate once we begin to go through the book, look at the poetry. I want to talk a little bit about how Grocery Shopping with My Mother is so appropriate for this collection of poems.
Well, as I mentioned, my mom got sick about 4 or 5 years ago, and she was not physically able to go to the grocery store by herself, unfortunately, for a little while. And so I'm an only child. I've been in New York for a long time. You know, New York's my home. Brooklyn's my home. I've lived there long there anywhere else, but I was born and raised in Jersey City, right across the river, as you know. And so I would have to make regular trips with my mom to the grocery store just to help her up and down the aisles and get her there, get her back home. And so I would literally sometimes be crying, walking behind my mother. She didn't know it. You know, I was just praying, you know, to all the deities, God, the deities, the universe, the ancestors, that my mom would, you know, I'm an only child, that she would be here for, you know, she would not, this is not her time. And so it was difficult, but it also opened up a lot of feelings about our complicated relationship. It opened up a lot of feelings just about our own mortality. You know, I think about that more than ever myself, even though I'm younger. You know, and so that's where it began. But grocery shopping also, as you know, as you all know, the listeners know, when you go to a grocery store, there's many items in every aisle, and there's many aisles. And so it also represents kind of like a metaphor for the book, because the book deals with my mother, it deals with other family members, it deals with the passing of Kobe Bryant and Sidney Poitier and Cicely Tyson. There's a poem about what Malcolm X means to me. There's love poems in there for my partner, the great love of my life. You know, there's different things in there. And so that's what it also represents, that title.
We're talking with Kevin Powell. The new book of poems is Grocery Shopping with My Mother. These are some really remarkable poems. These are really very powerful, insightful. There's the poem about Tupac and Biggie. There's a poem entitled Baseball. And, you know, one of the things that's interesting about Kevin Powell is his ability to take all of these things that are part of our daily experiences, daily life, and help us understand how they relate to what it is we're dealing with and what we're going through. And there's a greater significance. When I listen to Kevin, when I read Kevin, particularly talking about hip hop, I get another sense and a better sensitivity about hip hop, you know, and it comes from Kevin's insight. The poem, you know, the poem about your mother, you know, that poem is so powerful. I was just thinking, grocery shopping with my mother. I was just thinking that, you know, this poem is so insightful, so powerful. Maybe it's private, you know. Maybe you didn't want to. I might not want to read that poem. You know, this is like a personal poem between you and your mom. The way you begin to just talk about her and talk about the significance of grocery shopping, going down the aisle, what that's all about. You have a praise song for Sidney Poitier. Very, very insightful in examining Poitier, you know, very kind toward Poitier. There's a poem about the Beatles. There's it was hard for me to even put it in words how these poems are so insightful. And Kevin Powell, he always talks about when he was a kid, you know. But for some of us, he's still a very young man. But at your age, there's some real great wisdom, particularly for someone as young as you are. But now, is there? So I don't know if there's a poem or any. Let me just ask you this: there's the poem that is called "When I Found Malcolm X." Can we talk a little bit about that? What? And it's short enough to read here. I think, I'm not sure, but maybe you can just still talk about this poem, "When I Found Malcolm X." Let's talk. What happened when you found Malcolm X?
Well, I changed my life forever. I was 18 years old. I was just starting college, and I'm in Washington D.C. right now. We had a big, beautiful event for the book here last night. It was a full house. We sold all the books out, and we've done that in Atlanta and in L.A. and New York as well. And I said that it is a tragedy, and it's educational malpractice, and clearly it's racism. The fact that someone like me, who was born on the heels of the civil rights and Black Power movements, could come up in the school system and in this country and not know or learn any Black history whatsoever, K through 12, other than Black people had been enslaved, and the fact that maybe Rosa Parks refused to give her seat. Dr. King had a dream, and then he was dead, and Malcolm didn't exist, and nothing else existed about the movement at all, And so Malcolm opened me up, and you were talking about how I speak about my mom in the title poem, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. I got that from Malcolm. I'm an extension of Malcolm X, because the thing that struck me about reading his autobiography the first time, and I consider it one of my Bibles that I turn back to every few years, I reread it with a new set of eyes based on the life experiences I've had, is that he was brutally honest. He was transparent. He was not afraid to tell the truth, not about himself, nor about the society. And I think that there's something not only liberating when we do that, there's a certain kind of freedom that comes with that, but I also think it's healing, because we also understand that when we were kidnapped from Africa, stolen from Africa, and brought to this part of the world, be it the South America, the mainland America, or the Caribbean, the West Indies, or Latin America, because we know Black folks are all over these places, not only were we stripped of everything and told to hate ourselves and everything about us and lost our names, identities, but we also were deeply, profoundly traumatized. And it's not like there was some sort of mass therapy session that happened for Black folks in the context of America in 1865. Yes, we have Juneteenth, but there was no dialogue. Hey, Black man. Hey, Black woman. Hey, Black people. Hey, Black children. What just happened to us for the last couple of centuries? And so literally a lot of the traumas have been passed along from generation to generation. And for me, as a writer, as a poet, and as an activist, my responsibility is not only to tell the truth, but also say, hey, if we're not willing to have these sometimes uncomfortable, difficult conversations, we're not going to heal. We're going to be stuck in the same place. And what does it matter that Kevin Powell is on radio and TV and has 15 books and has traveled the world if I'm damaged on the inside, the same damage that my ancestors experienced on those plantations? And so that's why I write the way I do. It comes from Malcolm. It comes from other folks that I've read through the years, Ntozake Shange and Lucille Clifton, Maya Angelou, when I read Claude Brown's Man-Child in the Promised Land, George Jackson's Soledad Brother. These are books that inform me as a very young person that this is the way that we need to talk about our journey as Black people on this planet.
My, Kevin Powell with Bob Laws. It is 11:17 on this Saturday morning in the city. We're at WBAI 99.5 in New York City as well. Actually, BAI is national, of course. Radio stations now are streaming, and we're at WBAI.org. All of that didn't even exist when I came into radio in the glory days of Black music radio in the 1970s. But it is good to have Kevin Powell in this conversation right now. Kevin, there's a poem called Baseball. And you say, baseball is the father I wish I had. Me, a boy of summer and spring, like the almighty Casey with his bat. Let's talk a little bit about baseball, and baseball is the father that I wish I had.
Well, I was, like I said, I was an only child. My mom did an amazing job because, I think Black life in the context of systemic racism is a miracle that we're here. It's a miracle that we exist. It's a miracle that people like you and I have been able to do what we've been able to do in spite of all the obstacles thrown at us. And my mother, ate for education, migrated from the South to the North, from South Carolina up to New Jersey, where I was born, Jersey City, as I said. Unfortunately, my father was about a dozen years older than her, wasn't there. They weren't married, and she was forced to raise me by herself on welfare, food stamps, government cheese, and the kind of poverty I wouldn't wish on anyone. I mean, honestly, Mr. Law, this is why when I was a young man and I met folks like yourself and Gary Bird and other brothers, there was a natural gravitation because a lot of us who did not have father figures in the home were looking for fathers from every angle possible. And so we saw dope black men like you, great black men like you. It meant something to us because you all represented, just in the way y'all breathed, your breath, what was possible. And so I didn't have that. And so I had music, which saved my life. I had the library my mother took me to when I was 8 years old, and I fell in love with reading. That's why I'm a writer to this day. And I had sports, and baseball was the first love that I had. And I really was that kid who would play ball against a wall, in an urban environment by myself. I was really that kid who would just throw the ball up in the air and catch it with my glove because there was no one to play catch with. And there was a father hole, and my father is a recurring theme, just like my mom, throughout my writing life. It's not just this poetry book, but over time. But the difference is, over time, I decided that I had to make peace with certain things with both my mother and my father. What did I learn from these experiences? What kind of a man should I be based on him not being there and based on the damage that he had in his own life? And as you know, there's a poem in the book called My Father, which is basically coming to grips with the fact that he just let this go and forgive, given the context of who he was and what the system did to him. And he was simply following the script that he was given. He did not have a kind of consciousness, as we talked about in the old days, what we call wokeness in these times. He was just surviving. He just was surviving. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, when we're just surviving as black people, when under this system, it often means that we engage in a predatory behavior toward each other, almost like we're animals out in the wild, as Malcolm X says in his autobiography. And so it's a heavy place to get to. But baseball brought me joy, Mr. Law. Baseball brought me joy. I'm a lifelong Yankees fan. I could not afford to go to a baseball game until I was an adult, but now I go all the time. And that's not just the Yankees. If I'm on the road, I'll go somewhere, because I think it's also important as we're dealing with this work of struggle and fighting for truth-telling and freedom and empowerment for our communities, to make sure we hold on to those moments of joy. And Stevie Wonder's songs in the Key of Life represents joy for me. Baseball represents joy for me. Basketball represents joy for me. And I'm not going to let those things go no matter what anyone says. It's joy, and we need joy. Who said we can't have joy amidst the struggle?
I was telling someone about this catch that you reference in the poem. It was Vic Wirtz hit a fly ball to deep center field in the Polo Grounds. Polo Grounds had this really deep center field, more so than any other ballpark in the league, in the major league. And at that time, and Willie Mays did just as you say. He sprinted back, cap blowing off of his head. It was an impossible catch to make. And Willie Mays was probably the only ball player in the major league who could have made that catch. And he did. And he did spin around like a shot putter in the Olympics. And when he threw the ball back into the infield, put his whole body in it. And I was telling someone.
May I read that section of the poem?
Yeah.
If I don't understand that Willie Mays sprinted like he was speed racing the Underground Railroad, because he was, the wind ripping the cap from his head, his back to the world like Miles Davis, as he caught freedom in his outstretched mitt, whirled round like a shot putter in the Olympics, and flung freedom to his mama and them in a cotton field of dreams. I want to be Willie Mays, to say, hey, kids, with the coolest swag. Because when I was a child, Mr. Law, I read a lot of baseball books. I read a lot of stories about baseball players, and then that video of Willie Mays, I think it's the greatest catch ever made in baseball history, and I think that Willie Mays arguably is the greatest baseball player ever. He may not have the home run record the way Hank Aaron did for a long time, or Babe Ruth, or Barry Bonds. He may not have been in the biggest market after they left New York and the Giants moved to San Francisco, but in terms of all the skill sets, what he represented as a player, he was dynamic. He was a dynamic, and I just for me, writing a poem about baseball, too, the reason why I did it, because I've noticed how black people have been erased from baseball. And outside of Quincy Troop and E. Ethelbert Miller, barely any black male writers have ever written about baseball. So I read a lot of stuff about baseball as I was constructing this poem. And I said, you know what, I'm going to put black people in our history back into this sport, because it's unfair how we are not in this sport. People act like all we can do is play basketball or football. And we need to understand, before those sports, we were dominating baseball. When I was growing up in the 70s, you talk about the heyday of the 70s, there was many black players, who were dynamic. And I almost feel like it's been intentional to erase black men from baseball, and I'm not going to let that happen. That's why I wrote the poem. I wanted to remind people of our greatness in this sport.
And again, what is so insightful with Kevin Powell is
recognizing
all of that symbolism in that catch that Willie Mays made. And I agree, it was the greatest catch in baseball history. And to understand it in the context that you did, I think that is quite remarkable. I used that catch to let people know about possibilities, that you're up against what it appears to be unlikely, impossible, but that catch demonstrates that it whatever it is, it can be done. Whatever it is, the possibilities are there. But but then you recognize, because when you say you turned his back to the world like Miles Davis, Willie Mays he was not running sideways or trying to catch up to that ball. He turned his back to the infield, and he was running straight ahead out into center field without looking back, and caught that ball coming over his shoulder. It was such a long run, and it was such a remarkable catch. And the racist Ted Williams from the Boston Red Sox, he's the only person who tried to denigrate that catch. He said, well, it was no big thing. In the dugout, we knew he had it all the way. It was, boy, I'm telling you. But it was remarkable. I really appreciate you seeing it in the poem about baseball and how you understood what it really, really represents. There's the poem, My Father. You do talk about, there's a poem about Tupac and Biggie. You want to talk a little bit about that poem?
Yeah, it's interesting because I knew Tupac Shakur obviously really well, and I knew Biggie well, and Notorious B.I.G. Interviewed both of them. I did several cover stories for Quincy Jones's Vibe magazine on Tupac, and I was actually also in Vegas when he died. And, I wanted to write something that really talked about just how we now have multiple generations, not just one generation. We have multiple generations. There's Generation X, there's millennials, and there's also Generation Z that are behind your generation, sir. It's profound, and we've had multiple black male tragedies, murders, people shooting each other, people getting killed, and murders not being solved. Just insane things that have happened. Even in the last couple of years, we've lost nearly 100 rappers to some sort of gun violence in this country. And, we know that many of us, unfortunately, as again, back to Malcolm X have talked about, is that when you are given a script and you follow the script, that means that script often will mean self-hatred and self-annihilation. Self-hatred and self-annihilation. And so I wanted to write a poem. It's called Tupac and Biggie, that really speaks to what it is to be a black male in this society, particularly if you're a black male that is torn between going forward and going backwards, torn between going forward and being stuck in where you are, particularly if we're not able to get to a certain level of self-love and self-appreciation and self-empowerment as an individual and as a people. It's also not lost on me, sir, that this year, 2023, marks the 50th anniversary of the birth of hip-hop. And, we just celebrated Dr. King's birthday this past weekend, and we talked about this the last time I believe I was on your show. Dr. King, at the end of his life, was talking about economic justice. He was saying, what does it matter if you can sit anywhere on the bus if you have no money to get on the bus? What does it matter that you can sit at a lunch counter if you have no money to buy a sandwich, a hamburger? And the same poor people, the Poor People's Campaign, we know was the last thing he was trying to do. We know he was in Memphis organizing black male sanitation workers, famously carrying those signs, I am a man. Well, hip-hop was literally created by poor people, mostly black males, Latinx males, in New York City, in the Bronx, black African-Americans, West Indian, and Latinx males. And so the same poor people Dr. King told us not to forget, this is what I'm talking about in this poem, are the same poor people who created this thing called hip-hop, is now turning 50 years old. And unfortunately, we now have to make a distinction as hip-hop culture, which was created as a response to the economic injustice, I believe, both consciously and subconsciously, a response to the depravity of New York City in the 1970s. You know what I'm talking about. You recall how, poor people were just ignored. This whole underclass was rising up. And the culture was about light and possibilities. The culture is why people like me exist, But then the industry came along. The hip-hop industry is comparable to the minstrel show that was created in the 1800s. That was the number one entertainment in America for over 100 years, blackface, making black folks so ashamed of who they were because of their hair texture, their noses, their lips, their body types, all of that kind of stuff, over-sexualized, portrayed us as morally deprived and violent and dangerous. And we see the same thing in hip-hop, the industry. So this disastrous thing that I talk about in Tupac and Biggie, the poem, that you have this tension really between hip-hop culture, which was supposed to be about life, and then you have the hip-hop industry. It's no different than how we took lost-found instruments and created something called jazz, and jazz is America's only classical music form, but we know that somebody somewhere decided to riddle the jazz community with lots and lots and lots of drugs, which is why we have the drug abuse of Billie Holiday or Charlie Parker or other great jazz musicians. And it creates this whole space where we end up destroying ourselves out of something that should have been beautiful, our music, our art. And so I think that we have to talk honestly about these things and see that this is not something new just with hip-hop. I'm a big jazz fan, and when I started listening to jazz closely, Mr. Law, I said, let me go back and study who Miles was and who was Eric Dolphy and who was Billie Holiday and who was Sarah Vaughan, who these folks. And we look at their lives, and man, did I start to see a lot of parallels to what I've seen in hip-hop, where we created this thing that was beautiful, but then all this other stuff was going on around us that was destroying us. That, in my humble opinion, has been intentional.
Absolutely. In my humble opinion as well. Absolutely. We're talking to Kevin Powell, talking about his new book of poems, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. Kevin has an autobiography, The Education of Kevin Powell, A Boy's Journey into Manhood, and it is being adapted for the screen. It's being turned into a film. Just want you to have a little more of an idea of who Kevin Powell is. He is directing, writing, and producing his first documentary film, which is entitled When We Were Free, When We Free the World. And he talks about healthy manhood versus toxic manhood. He talks about fathers and sons, and he is also a playwright. Working on an upcoming stage play based on the poems in this book, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. He is also looking to launch a new American organization in 2023, yet to be named, but it focuses on voter education and voter empowerment and bringing people together, and which will showcase a website full of blogs from contributors of diverse backgrounds. He's also has been involved with an annual clothing drive for homeless youth in New York City, a leadership role in the movement to redefine manhood away from sexism and violence, a deep responsibility to mentorship, as you hear him talk about how people mentored him just by their very presence and what he was able to learn from them. People might want to consider that sometimes you might be in a position to mentor. You might be mentoring someone without fully realizing that is what you are doing. So be mindful of what you do. There might be somebody like Kevin Powell watching you. There's a great deal more. There's even more that Kevin Powell is engaged in, and he's with us right now at WBAI. We're at 99.5. I'm Bob Law, and it is a conversation with Kevin about his book, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. I think we should just kind of look at that poem, get a little bit further into that particular poem as well. We'll do that in a moment. Let's look a little bit closer at the title poem for this book album. It is Grocery Shopping with My Mother. Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about that poem? Like I say, it is very, very open, transparent, insightful, just understanding your mother and understanding all of what she would do, even when she would fuss at you. You kind of understand that. And the poem begins by saying, "Dear God, please do not take my mother from me anytime soon. I'm not ready." Let's talk a little bit about this poem.
Well, I mean, one, I have to pay homage to the Black literary tradition. And we know that Langston Hughes wrote a great poem called Mother to Son. I remember the first time I read that, I immediately thought of my mother, and it actually made me cry. I was really affected by it. We know that we've had many great songs through Black music traditions. I remember as a kid, you know the song I'm talking about, Bob Law, Mr. Bob Law. It was a sad day when Toby went away. Remember that song? What was the name? Was that the name of the song? Was it Toby? It was in the 70s, and I remember that song as a kid. I don't know if it was the Spinners or someone who made that song, but that stuck with me. And obviously, bringing it back to Tupac, I did an exclusive interview with Tupac in prison for Vibe, and I was one of the first people who got to hear "Dear Mama," the song he made in tribute to his mother, legendary activist in Black Panther, Fannie Shakur. I remember that song to this day still affects me greatly. So I thought about those things as I was writing this poem. Even when we look back to Stevie Wonder, there's parts of "I Wish" where he's talking about being a child, and what he experienced. So I drew on all those types of things. And Alice Walker's "The Color Purple," the whole book was written in "Dear God." That's where that came from for the poem from my mother, "Dear God." There's something about faith, whether Black folks are Christians or Muslims or some other. There's something about us where faith is part of our response, I believe, to oppression, to the systemic oppression. We have to believe in something, because how do we survive all of this? And I think that for me too, I think if we can get to a point where we have digested Black history as I've done, Black cultural traditions as I've done, I'm a Black writer, I'm a Black artist, I'm a Black activist. It also is about how do we love and forgive our own community. Because a friend of mine from Mississippi, an activist for a long time, Charlie Braxton, said, "Kevin, we have to practice unconditional love with our people. We can't just put conditions on "I'll love you if." That doesn't mean it's easy, because it's difficult, as you know, Mr. Law, oftentimes to deal with our people who have internalized the racism that has been put on us, and we end up taking it out on each other. And that includes our family members at times. We know this, but at the same time, I'm not going to let my mother go physically without at least having some sort of understanding. I was doing an interview a few weeks back with a white brother who was interviewing me about the book, and he said, "Well, it sounds like," he was basically trying to say some things about my mother that I said, "No, what you have to understand, because you're not Black, is that our relationships are complicated." And my mother was treating me a certain kind of way as a single Black woman, raising me by herself with literally nothing, because she was really saying to me, if you don't behave yourself in this house, something can get you outside. It might be the police, it might be a white supremacist, it might be some people who are damaged in our own community who do things to each other. And so it's not as simple as saying, "Well, look at how your mother treated you," or "Look at this, look at that." I'm like, no, it's so many layers to this. What I've realized is that through years of therapy, because Black people should go to counseling, should go to therapy, look again at all the traumas we've carried around for centuries, we should get some form of help, even if it's just a small brother group or a sister group or a Black people group, where we can talk about some of the stuff that we've dealt with. Because, Mr. Law, I've been to all 50 states in this country, 5 of the 7 continents around the world. I've had all kinds of conversations with people, and so many people are hurting out here because we're told that we shouldn't talk about stuff. And just like we were told on those plantations, we shouldn't talk about stuff. And how do I know that? Because just like Malcolm did, and I learned this from Malcolm X, we better study how we've been oppressed, because that affects how we operate in the present.
There's some people holding on who want to say hello to Kevin Powell. I promise I'll let you do that at 212-209-2877. We'll go to the phones. First caller. Let's try this. Is there a caller with me?
Yes, Ricky Hopkins from Edison, New Jersey.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, my brother. It's refreshing to hear from you as a young man. You know, I remember watching you early years on MTV, but that's another story into itself, and I was always drawn to your character on that show. You hit on a lot of points, my brother. I just want to be real swift. Real quick about the baseball, you know. And recently I was on Instagram, and like you said, you know, bringing swag back to baseball, because I grew up playing baseball on the block when we was growing up. We used to play against different blocks, you know, baseball.
That's right.
You know, so baseball was big for us back then, and this was like during the 70s. But I remember seeing on Instagram that you had the Pirates and I think the Chicago White Sox. They had the old clippings of baseball cards in the magazines where that you had Dick Allen and Dave Parker. Dick Allen had a cigarette in his mouth, tossing three baseballs. Dave Parker had a clip that he broke his jaw and he had like a face mask, still playing baseball. And then on top of that, he was in the dugout smoking a cigarette, and then had another shot of him, how much swag we had as a people. He had a brim hat on, not a baseball cap, a brim hat with his uniform on.
That's
so all that pretty much got replaced with the football and the other sports, but baseball was our thing back then. And then another thing, real quick, you talk about Malcolm X.
Oh, wait. I don't have time for another thing. I've got some other people holding on, and we've got to hurry. But I appreciate your calling, helping us with this conversation. You can join us as well. See if we can get in as many people as I can in a few minutes. 212-209-2877. But I need you to come right to your point. Thank you, brother. Thank you for calling. Is there another caller with me? Hello. Am I still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sir.
Kevin?
Is there a caller?
Hello?
All right. Sean, go on to the next caller. Then if there's another caller.
He's there.
He's there. Come on with it.
All right, Kevin. I don't know if you... William Hooker, just congratulations on your book. My best to you and Jenna. And it's just been such a long time. That's all I could say. I was just shocked to hear your voices. I woke up this morning. All the best. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
I think that caller doesn't know that I got divorced from the person he just mentioned, but it's okay.
Okay. Is there another caller?
Yeah.
Come on.
He's writing a book about a documentary and making a movie. There's some points that I think that can go into the movie. Some obscure events that are overlooked in history. Because he was talking about the fact that he wasn't educated about the Black Panthers, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, and so on and so on. And nobody ever talks about Medgar Evers.
All right. You said, all right. I don't remember him saying that he was never educated about any of that. What I need you to do is pay attention so that when you call me, you can speak with some authority being on, for at least being correct about what this. Anyway, I'm trying to be nice. So we'll just move on. But if you want to say hello to Kevin Powell, you can still do so if you can get through at 212-209-2877. We're talking about the new book and it is a book of poems. Now, Kevin, I understand this is the first actual book that is a collection of your poems. You have written poems before. You've written, any of articles, essays, and poems. But this is the first time that your poems have been published as a collection. Is that right?
No, this is actually my third poetry collection, but my first in 14 years. So it's been a long time.
Okay.
and I will never go this long again. I love poetry, and honestly, when I think about Sonia Sanchez and Amiri Baraka, rest in peace, Mr. Baraka, and folks who inspired me, I cannot imagine not being a poet for the rest of my life. So I've already got 3 more poetry books coming. I already know what they're going to be. I'm very serious about it at this point. And we're actually also going to turn, not only going to turn this poetry book, some of the poems in this book into a play. I'm also working on a spoken word album with music that we're going to put out later this year as well. I'm really excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. I'm excited about whatever it is you might be planning. I want to see what it is going to be. These poems, there's a poem in here that says, "I am magic." And I'm saying, folks, that all of these poems are indeed magic. All of these poems have an energy and a spiritual force. There's a poem called Jamaican Love Poem. There's and these poems all come from Kevin Powell's insight, which is remarkable. You want to join the conversation? Okay, I see you. 212-209-2877. That number puts you into the conversation. And there's a caller holding on. Come right on. The caller with me?
Yes. Good morning, Bob. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Yes. Kevin, I would like to tell you that I was in your presence in 2 stages of your illustrious career as an activist, as a writer. I remember back in 1989, you and Lisa Williamson, a.k.a. Sister Soldier, was in a youth group back in under the auspices of Ben Chavis. And, I forgot what the group was called. And
it's called
also
NISA. Yes, sir.
Yeah, NISA. Exactly. I was there at the beginning with you. And also, years later, I met you at a cafe in downtown Brooklyn. It was myself, Hill Harper, and my brother. And we were sitting, at the table discussing things, our condition and, politics of the day. So in 2 stages of the career, I admired you ever since you were a student at Rutgers back in the nicer days. So, that was before you was on The Real World, MTV. That was even before that, right?
Yes, sir. It was. Wow.
Yes.
Well, all praise is due to God, sir, and thank you for even being supportive. I appreciate you. I'm just happy to still be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, now, thank you for calling, and thank you for mentioning Lisa or Sister Soldier. She said, but then indeed, when I met you, Kevin, you were with Sister Soldier. That was before she was Soldier. That's when she was still Lisa Williamson. I believe, and then shortly after that, we did a youth expo and introduced her to Bill Stepney, and then Bill Stepney took her to Chuck D, and he gave her back to us as Sister Soldier, who is also a remarkable writer, insight, talented. These young people are really gifted. I've always thought that if we help them find their voice, that we discover something that is really powerful, remarkable. Sister Soldier is a really gifted writer, and I think her most recent is The Coldest Winter Ever. Then you look at people like people who. Queen Latifah started out just rapping, but did you ever hear Queen Latifah sing? She's got a remarkable voice.
I have her album. Yes, sir.
Yeah, got a remarkable voice and a really talented actress. There's a great deal of talent in from all of the emerging generations. A great deal of talent, and I believe also that there's a very deliberate scheme to try and misdirect, block, discourage, and break their spirit. But as Maya Angelou has pointed out, you can't do that. Still, they rise. There's another caller holding on. Hello, are you with me?
Yes, I'm just calling to say I thoroughly appreciate this conversation. Young man, you are a light on the path for many young folks. And I've been on the phone calling relatives to alert them for their children, to have them listen to you. You're an example to be followed and a true light on the path. And I appreciate you, really. I wish you nothing but the best and strength. It pains me to see so much, like it pains a lot of us, to see what our young people are into these days and the way that the roads they've gone down. And you are a light on the path, and I wish you and all around you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. I mean, I'm not here without God, the ancestors, my mother, people like you, Mr. Law. I mean, you gave us a platform. We were, myself and Sister Soldier and other young people, we were very, very young, and people like you believed in us and gave us a platform that, as we say in the hip-hop world, that put a battery in our backs and kept us going. So I don't believe in taking credit for anything without acknowledging that this is a community thing that happens, and then we just keep going. Last night when I was here in Washington, a friend of mine who has a wonderful organization for young people in a perfect world that she's a part of, I should say, she brought her young people out there, and it was just incredible. There were kids as young as 6, 7 years old, and some were teenagers just sitting there engaging, listening to the conversation and the poetry reading and everything like that. And we just got to keep passing it forward. And I want to say to people out there, Mr. Law, if I may, we can't give up on our young people. We have to understand, again, that so many things are being thrown at every single generation of young people. I mean, think about what was thrown at young people in the 70s with heroin and the post-civil rights era, what was thrown at us in the 80s with crack cocaine, the prison industrial complex that exploded with that crime bill, quote-unquote, that Bill Clinton signed in the 1990s. We've literally had things thrown at us from every single angle. And I had a brother reach out to me yesterday on social media, and he said, well, what can we do? We need to show up in our communities. We need to be voices in our communities. We need folks to step up. It's not one generation. It has to be multi-generational, the work that we do. There's things that Mr. Bob Law can teach us because of his long time doing this work and his experiences, his incredible wisdom. But there's also things that we can do who are younger as well, and part of it is making sure that we're actively engaged. I mean, if I may, Mr. Law, I know we don't have a lot of time, but if I could just read the poem from my father, because one of the things I realized is that, especially to black men, one reason why I'm doing this film on black men, one reason why one of my 15 books is called The Black Male Handbook, I'm particularly concerned about all black people, but I also think about, as a black man, what is needed from us. I grew up admiring, people like you and Gary Bird. I grew up admiring people like Amiri Barak and Haki Mahabuti. I grew up admiring people like Malcolm X and Dr. King and Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture, all these brothers. And I think that, we need to understand that the reason why a lot of our black males are out there just kind of wilding out is they don't see anything other than athletes, entertainers, and folks who are engaged in criminal activities in our communities more than anything else. And so that's critical. If I may, really quickly.
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. It's called My Father. This poem in my book, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. I forgive you for leaving me as a little boy with a hole the size of a jumbo airplane with no arms, because you did not know how to love yourself. I forgive you for telling my mother she lied, that you would never give her a near nickel for me again, though I did not know what a near nickel was. I forgive you for the times my mother yelled at me not to be like you, but then also screamed, I was just like you. I forgive you for those moments when my mother grabbed and shook me when she really wanted to grab and shake you. I forgive you for all the graveyard moments where I wished I was being taught by you how to be a man, but had to scan the different angles of blinking eyes of some other male life while they were not looking. I forgive you for never calling me after that day you bumped into my mother years later and took my telephone number and said that you would, but never did. I forgive you for the hurt forever lurking there like a pipe bomb in my living room, for the hurt forever sleeping there like an unwanted partner in my bedroom. I forgive you because I heard how years later, on your death march, with a body part or two chopped off, missing, you asked your other children for me, the only one not there, the only one up north, the only one who had barely ever seen you, the only one who did not know you, the only one who had never called you dad or pop or sir. I forgive you for dying without my knowing. Yet I cried a decade later when I found out, because the hole was still there. I forgive you because I also forgive me. For all those many years, I hated myself for having no father.
My. It is from the new book, Grocery Shopping with My Mother. Grocery Shopping. That was so powerful, boy, I'm telling you. Grocery Shopping with My Mother by Kevin Powell. Now, the book is out now. It's available. It is in bookstores. Anybody still going to bookstores? Is it online? How else can people get copies of the book?
Anywhere, I want to encourage folks to support independent bookstores like Sisters Uptown up there in Harlem. Shout out to those sisters, the mother and daughter who own that bookstore, Black Mother, Black Daughter. It's all over, and people can just order. You don't have to go outside your home to get it. And I'm going to be recording the audiobook for it in the next few weeks, so the audiobook will be available in a couple of months as well. So a lot of folks have been asking about that, so that's definitely coming in. And as I said, an album of 9 of the 36 poems that are in the book will be coming out later this year with live music. I'm really excited about it, Mr. Law, to be doing that in the spirit of Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets and the Watts Prophets and Mr. Baraka, Mary Baraka, and Nikki Giovanni, and Camille Yarbrough, Nana Camille, and all those folks who put poetry to music. I'm just like pushing our traditions. We got to honor our traditions, and that's what I'm trying to do, sir.
Am I bypassing Sean? Am I bypassing the last caller? Is somebody still holding on?
Let's see. Go ahead, caller. He left.
No caller? Okay.
No caller.
Okay. All right. We're about to run out of time for this page 1 of From the Street with Bob Law this morning. Kevin Powell's new book, Grocery Shopping with My Mother by Kevin Powell. It is I'm telling you, it is a remarkable book of poems. And you can hear in the conversation with Kevin his insight as well as his connection to the legacy from which he comes. Kevin, just in general conversation, you talk about people. And, I've interviewed a lot of people who don't necessarily reference any of the people who got them over. You certainly do. You remember Nana Camille Yarbrough. You remember Nikki Giovanni and using music with her poems. She used the New York City Community Choir, put gospel music behind her poems. And I really appreciate your moving forward, but I appreciate your looking back as you move forward and bringing all of us along with you. I particularly appreciate that. Thank you so much for spending this time this morning with me as we get these conversations in the air. Thank you so much. And really, y'all should start ordering the book right now. And if you, Uptown, where is the Sisters? What is the name of the bookstore, Uptown?
Sisters Uptown, that's in Harlem. They definitely should have the book. You just got to call local bookstores, especially independent bookstores, especially Black-owned bookstores, and just say, hey, can you order this book for me? I just want to encourage folks to be proactive with supporting independent bookstores. That's really, really critical. And Mr. Law, just bless you for having me. I don't take it for granted every opportunity, and I really appreciate your time.
All right, now we're going to stay in touch. We're going to try to keep up with you. And again, thank you so much for spending this morning with me. It is 12 noon in the city. And the book, I want you to remember, Grocery Shopping with My Mother by Kevin Powell. You will be delighted. If you buy this book, you will be delighted as you begin to read these poems and begin to experience what Kevin Powell has experienced with these songs in the key of life. These poems really are songs in the key of life. And again, Kevin, thank you for being with me.